My pen name is Striker Flint. Here I am collecting data for this project, which I call the Rule of Thumb. The system that evolved into the imperial measurement system served Britain well for many years, despite its seemingly random units, such as 12 inches to a foot, 3 feet to a yard, 22 yards to a chain, and so on. As a schoolboy, having to learn and manipulate all these metrics, I did wonder about them. That curiosity eventually led me to work on the rule of thumb. When our Neolithic ancestors began farming and left behind hunter-gathering to settle down to primitive commerce and trade, they quickly found it essential to develop a standardized, practical system of measures. It was as important then as now that a measure of grain or pint of beer was the same size wherever it was traded. What measurements might our Neolithic ancestors have used? 60 years ago, after World War II, Professor Alexander Thom must have asked himself that same question, for he began to carefully measure around 600 Neolithic stone circles, including Stonehenge. By so doing, he discovered our ancestors used the megalithic yard. This is 2 feet 8 3/8 inches, or 830 millimeters. Despite Professor Thom's flawless research and maths, and his calculations being approved by Britain's leading statisticians, leading archaeologists dismissed Thom's findings. Those experts denied our Neolithic ancestors could be capable of such ideas. Thom's name was mud, as was any archaeologists who dared to suggest Thom might be right. Seeking to remedy this apparent injustice, I looked around for other measurable Neolithic artifacts. My hope was that their measurements might support Professor Thom's megalithic yard of 830 millimeters. I also wondered if it might be the case that these Neolithic measurements might in turn show themselves to be the basis for that seemingly random imperial measurement system that had so intrigued me as a child. Surviving Neolithic rock art consists mainly of 4,000 to 5,000-year-old carved granite art. I found 2 suitable types of these carvings to provide the data which allowed me to generate the theory of the rule of thumb. The first and more common source was Neolithic ring-marked stones. Neolithic ring-marked stones are a series of concentric circles chipped without any metal tools into granite. Their overall diameters vary, but the gaps between one ring and its neighbours on either side prove to be, for the most part, pleasingly regular and consistent. After 2 years of fieldwork in 7 different countries, I accumulated the dimensions of over 1,000 ring-marked stones, including from Carchena in Switzerland and several from La Palma Island in the Canaries. Specimen after specimen possessed the same 23 millimeters plus or minus 2 millimeters ridge gap. Statistical frequency analysis proved tricky, as the data were so similar at 23 plus or minus 2 millimeters. This consistency of rim gaps is far beyond mere coincidence. Handily, the ridge gap is also the diameter of the £1 coin. The second source of my data is Neolithic carved stone balls. These rare objects, some wonderfully decorated, are about the size of tennis balls. I gathered the diameters of every one held in the UK and Irish museums. Most appear to have originated in what is now Scotland. Interestingly, the British Museum holds a plain-looking one with a 69 millimeter diameter. It was found in the tomb of the time of Pharaoh Khufu, 2500 BC, around the same date as when the previous Woodhenge became Stonehenge. Statistical analysis of over 360 of them showed a remarkable target diameter of 69 millimeters plus or minus 2 millimeters. But again, so what? How do these facts help restore Professor Alexander Thom's reputation? It doesn't require a mathematics degree to work out that 69 millimeters is 3 times 23 millimeters. It now seemed for over 1,000 years, every Neolithic carved stone ball was sculpted to a target diameter of 3 times the average ridge gap of the deliberately carved Neolithic ring-marked stones. Had I found the universal common basic Neolithic unit of measure 23 millimeters plus or minus 2 millimeters? Whatever, I dubbed this the Neolithic inch. Again, interesting, but how does it clear Professor Thom's name? The graph shows the frequency of 23 millimeters for Neolithic ring-marked stones and for 69 millimeters for Neolithic carved stone balls. It suggests that the Neolithic craftsmen worked towards an agreed and common dimension, my Neolithic inch, or its multiple. But on what basis was that measurement in turn based? What measuring device did Neolithic craftsmen living and working hundreds, even thousands of miles apart and over hundreds of years have in common? The obvious ruler is our body. We take our bodies with us wherever we go. There is little evidence to show that Northwest European humans have changed physically since those times. The final section of my little finger is 23 millimeters, as is the width of my squashed thumb. Thus, I'm carrying around with me the only measure I need should I wish to carve either ring-marked stones or Neolithic carved stone balls. This, then, is the basis for my rule of thumb. My foot length is 12 times 1 pound coin, or 1 foot in imperial measures, or 276 millimeters in metric. My average pace is 36 Neolithic inches. The Neolithic foot is 12 Neolithic inches, or 276 millimeters. 3 times that is the Neolithic pace, or yard. 36 Neolithic inches, or 828 millimeters. Neolithic furlongs and miles and the squares of all these for area is a logical extension. It all makes good sense. For example, an acre is still the average size of field that can be ploughed in an average day by an average ploughman following an average plough horse. As my Neolithic pace is only 2 millimeters less than Thom's megalithic yard, the great man and I seem to have arrived at the same conclusion. But what about weights and capacities? What part does a Neolithic inch play in those measurements? The illustration shows a container whose interior measures 6 by 6 by 5 Neolithic inches. It holds exactly a pint of liquid or a pound of barley. We haven't found any such equivalent Neolithic boxes, so my supposition is that Neolithic pots did that job. Clay can be moulded to that capacity. The point could be safely tested by filling a sample with a pint of polystyrene beads. Now for some speculation. Rock art also begs the question, why? Why did grown men spend months in the open chipping away at granite without even the benefit of metal tools? Remember, please, that we are thinking here about the New Stone Age, the Neolithic age, when working with stone, masonry, was becoming a skill in increasing demand. I suggest that rock art in its various forms was one way apprentices honed their talents, proving themselves ready, willing, and able to learn and master the mason's craft and preserve its secrets. As this set of standards appeared over much of Northwest Europe, it is possible that trained people traveled the land checking and ensuring a common standard. I theorize that such persons may have been what Caesar and the modern world call druids. Perhaps the wand carried by witches is a folk memory of a measuring rod carried by these druids. Berlin's Neuss Museum exhibits a pre-Roman, tall, pointed gold leaf hat on which is stamped a code enabling the calculation of key astronomical events such as solstices and equinoxes. Elsewhere, there are other, poorer such gold hats. Obviously, gold being a metal, such hats aren't Neolithic. But I suggest they are metal developments of much simpler Neolithic hats. A cloth bag over the head naturally forms a cone. This accords well with folklore, suggesting the Druids wore pointed caps as their symbol of authority. This tradition has come down to us as the pointed hats worn by Welsh wise women, and of course by Halloween witches and wizards. At the outset, I said the rule of thumb had a twofold aim. One, to explain how the imperial measurement system might have come about, and two, to restore the trashed reputation of the late Scott and Oxford professor of maths, Alexander Thom. I have now made my case for the Neolithic basis of the imperial measurement system. So what then of Professor Thom? Professor Thom's megalithic yard is only 2 millimeters longer than my Neolithic pace, so I am confident I can say we are both right, and that the two measurements are connected, and that all those doubting archaeological Thomases were wrong about the good Professor Thom. The megalithic Neolithic yard is genuine. R.I.P., sir. That's it. Many of my non-professional books are available on Kindle. They are works of fiction, but this, the rule of thumb, is entirely factual. Go and measure the artifacts yourself if you don't believe me. My thanks to grandson Hamish and his mother for putting all this together.